Scary telling.
I woke up on Easter morning feeling excited and full of anticipation. I knew that my parents had planned something special for me, and I couldn't wait to find out what it was. After we went to Easter Mass, we went out for brunch, which was delicious, and I had a lot of fun playing with my cousins. But I couldn't wait to get back home and see what my parents had in store for me. When we got back home, my dad told me that he had a surprise for me. "I got you a new bunny for Easter," he said, holding up a small kennel. Inside was a tiny white bunny with soft fur and big floppy ears. I couldn't believe it. I had always wanted a bunny, but my parents had said that we couldn't have pets because of my allergies. But now, here was a bunny just for me. As soon as my dad set the kennel down on the table, I rushed over to take a closer look. The bunny was so cute and small, and I couldn't wait to hold him. I asked my dad what I should name him, and he suggested Bunnicula. I loved the name and started calling him that right away. But even as I held Bunnicula and petted him, a small voice inside me started to worry. What if something happened to this bunny, like what had happened to the bunnies from the previous years? My parents had always told me that they had escaped or gotten sick, but I wasn't so sure. And why did my mom look so uncomfortable whenever I brought up the topic? Despite my worries, I tried to push them aside and focus on how happy I was to have my very own bunny. My dad promised me that we would take good care of Bunnicula, and I wanted to believe him. But as the day went on, and we settled in to watch Peter Rabbit, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I didn't know what the future held for me and Bunnicula, but I hoped it would be good. The days after Easter were filled with joy and excitement. I spent every moment I could with Bunnicula, holding him, petting him, and watching him hop around his new home. But no matter how happy I felt, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One day, I was in my room with Bunnicula, trying to teach him some new tricks, when I heard my mom talking to my dad in hushed tones. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell that my mom was worried about something. I asked her what was wrong, but she just smiled and said everything was fine. That's when I decided to investigate. Late that night, I snuck out of bed and crept down the hallway towards my parents' room. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear my parents talking inside. I pressed my ear against the door, trying to make out what they were saying. "It's not fair to him," my mom was saying. "He's just a child. He doesn't understand what he's getting into. He needs to learn to be responsible," my dad replied. "This is a good opportunity for him to learn how to take care of another living being." I couldn't make sense of what they were talking about, but I knew it had something to do with me and Bunnicula. I decided to confront my parents the next day, but I didn't get the chance. When I woke up the next morning, I went to check on Bunnicula in his kennel. That's when I saw a small patch of fur was missing from his back, and there was a scab in its place. I felt sick to my stomach. Had my parents hurt Bunnicula? Was he going to end up like the previous bunnies, mutilated and broken? I tried to keep my worries to myself, but I couldn't help but feel anxious every time I saw Bunnicula. He seemed happy and healthy, but I knew that something was wrong. I decided to keep a close eye on him, watching him carefully and making sure that he was safe. One day, while I was playing with him in the living room, my dad came in and picked him up. "Let me show you something," he said, holding Bunnicula up to his face. "See how cute he is? And he's so soft." He stroked Bunnicula's fur with one hand, while the other hand tightened around his neck. "But you have to be careful with him," he said, squeezing slightly. "He's fragile. You don't want to hurt him, do you?" I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Something was very wrong. And I knew that if I didn't do something, Bunnicula would suffer the same fate as the previous bunnies. I had to find a way to stop my dad before it was too late. As the days went by, my fear and anxiety about Bunicula's safety grew. I knew something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my parents were hiding something from me. I started to pay more attention to their conversations, trying to catch any hints about what was going on. And one day, I heard something that would change everything. I was playing outside when I heard my parents arguing inside the house. I couldn't make out all of the words, but I could hear my dad's angry voice and my mom's fearful whimpers. I crept closer to the house, trying to hear what they were saying. "Not going to do it again," my mom was saying. "You promised me you wouldn't." "It's just a bunny," my dad replied. "What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that you're teaching our son to hurt animals. You're turning him into a monster." I felt sick to my stomach. Was my dad really teaching me to hurt animals? And was he planning to hurt Bunicula? I listened in as they continued to argue, and I started to piece together the truth. My dad had been abusing animals for years, and he had been forcing me to participate in his sick games. And now, he was planning to hurt Bunicula, just like he had hurt the previous bunnies. I knew that I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I was just a kid, and my dad was big and strong. But I couldn't stand by and let him hurt Bunicula or any other animal. That night, I snuck out of bed and crept down the hallway towards my parents' room. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear them talking inside. "We have to stop this," my mom was saying. "We have to protect our son and the animals." "You're overreacting," my dad replied. "It's just a bit of fun. He needs to learn to be tough." I felt angry and scared. How could my dad be so cruel and heartless? And why was my mom just standing by and letting him do it? I decided to take matters into my own hands. I made a plan to escape with Bunicula and my mom and to break free from my dad's abuse once and for all. It was a risky plan, but I knew it was the only way to save ourselves and the animals. The next morning, I told my mom everything. I told her about the previous bunnies, about my dad's abuse, and about my plan to escape. At first, she was hesitant and scared, but eventually she agreed to help me. Together, we gathered our things and snuck out of the house while my dad was at work. We took Bunicula with us, and I promised to take care of him forever. We drove to a safe place where we could start a new life away from my dad and his abuse. It was a scary and uncertain time, but I felt relieved and hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe and loved. And I knew that as long as I had my mom and Bunicula by my side, we could overcome anything. As my mom and I started our new life away from my dad, I felt a sense of relief and freedom. But I also felt a deep sadness and anger at what my dad had done. I couldn't believe that he had forced me to hurt animals, and I couldn't shake the memories of the previous bunnies that had suffered under his abuse. One day, while I was playing with Bunicula, my dad showed up unannounced. He burst into the room and snatched Bunicula away from me, holding him tightly in his hands. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, my heart pounding with fear. "I want Bunicula back," he said, his voice cold and menacing. "He's mine, and I have a right to him." I felt my anger and fear rising. I wasn't going to let him hurt Bunicula again. I stood up to him, trying to look him in the eyes despite my trembling hands. "You can't have him," I said. "He's mine now, and I won't let you hurt him again." My dad just laughed, a cold and cruel sound. "You don't get it, do you?" he said. "I'm in charge here. And if you don't do what I say, you and your mom will suffer the consequences." I felt a deep sense of dread and despair. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt Bunicula, but I also didn't want to see my mom or myself get hurt. My dad stared at me, waiting for me to make a choice. I felt tears streaming down my face as I tried to think of a way out of this nightmare. Suddenly, I had an idea. It wasn't a good idea, but it was the only one I had. I would have to hurt Bunnicula to save myself and my mom. I reached out and grabbed Bunnicula by the neck, feeling his small body squirming in my hands. I tried not to think about what I was doing as I slammed him against the wall, killing him instantly. My dad smiled, a sick and twisted expression. "Good job," he said. "You're getting better at this. Next year, I bet you won't even cry." I felt a sense of horror and disgust at what I had done. I had become just like my dad, a monster who hurt innocent animals. I collapsed to the ground, sobbing in agony and disbelief. My dad left the room, satisfied with what he had done. But I knew that I couldn't keep living like this. I had to find a way to stop him once and for all. After that terrible day, I knew that I had to break free from my dad's abuse. I couldn't keep living in fear and pain, and I couldn't let him hurt any more animals. I started to make a plan. I would gather evidence of his abuse, and I would use it to get him arrested and charged with animal cruelty. It wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to stop him. I started to keep a journal, writing down everything I could remember about his abuse. I also took pictures of the scars and injuries on the previous bunnies, and I started to document his behavior and actions. It was a risky plan, but I knew that I had to do it. And I was determined to see it through, no matter what. One day, while my dad was at work, I gathered all of my evidence and went to the police station. I was scared and nervous, but I knew that it was the right thing to do. I showed them my journal and the pictures, and I told them everything that had happened. They listened carefully, and they promised to investigate. It was a long and difficult process, but eventually, my dad was arrested and charged with animal cruelty. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to jail time and community service. It was a relief to know that he would no longer be able to hurt animals and that justice had been served. But the process had taken a toll on me and my family. We had to move again, to start a new life away from the memories and pain of the past. It was a difficult transition, but we were able to find a new home and a new sense of safety and security. And through it all, I had Bunnicula by my side. He was a reminder of the terrible things that had happened, but he was also a symbol of hope and healing. He had been my friend and companion through the darkest of times, and I promised to always take care of him and to never let anyone hurt him again. As I look back on those dark days, I felt a sense of gratitude and strength. I had overcome a terrible situation, and I had come out stronger and braver than I ever thought possible. And I knew that as long as I had my family and my animal companions by my side, I could face anything that came my way.